During the Vietnam War, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara was pushing for the United States Air Force and Navy to operate as many common aircraft as possible, even if compromises had to be made. Because of this policy by McNamara, the Air Force and Navy embarked on the TFX program, or better known as the F-111 Aardvark. Its design purpose for the Air Force was to be an interdictor and became an interceptor for the Navy, but the F-111 was far from an air superiority fighter, so in January 1965, McNamara would ask the Air Force to consider a new tactical fighter design. There were already several designs that could fill the role, such as the A-4 Skyhawk and the A-7 Corsair II, which the Navy preferred. While the Air Force was more set on the Northrop F-5, the F-5 could defend itself, but the Air Force wanted a new design that would be focused on attack and be able to dominate the air. The desire for a new air dominance fighter would be reinforced when a few months later in April 1965, two F-105 Thunder Chiefs were lost to outdated MiG-17s in combat. By October 1965, the requirements for the new air superiority fighter were finalized, and they were soon sent out to 13 different companies in December 1965. Out of the 13 companies, 8 submitted designs, and 4 of them were asked to provide further designs in order to narrow the search. Some 500 designs were submitted. The aircraft were roughly the same size and weight of the F-111, and because the F-111 wasn't an air superiority fighter, the submitted designs could not be considered. You see, during Vietnam, the United States was focusing on long-range combat using missiles. This made the aircraft heavy, with high speed but limited maneuverability. Perhaps the ultimate example of this doctrine was the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II. This was the only fighter in the US arsenal that had enough power, range, and maneuverability to be given the primary task of dealing with the threat of Soviet fighters while flying with visual engagement rules. Around this time, the Navy decided that the F-111 would not meet the requirements needed, so they began development of a new dedicated fighter design. The design was designated VFAX. In May 1966, McNamara asked the Air Force and Navy to study the designs and see whether the VFAX would meet the Air Force's FX program requirements. 18 months later, the results of the studies concluded that the Air Force and Navy required different needs too different to use a standard aircraft. The Navy wanted emphasis on loiter time and mission flexibility, while the Air Force was primarily focusing on maneuverability. Something shocking would happen in 1967. The Soviet Union revealed the MiG-25. The MiG-25 was a high-speed, high-altitude interceptor. It had a very high speed of Mach 2.8. These features required the airplane to use stainless steel instead of aluminum in many places. The added weight of the steel required larger wings to be able to operate at high altitudes. The US Department of Defense was seriously concerned and thought they were being outclassed. The United States already suspected the MiG-23 was better than the F-4. The FX program would have had an answer to the MiG-23, but now that the MiG-25 appeared to be superior in speed, service ceiling, and endurance, the MiG-25's appearance was also somewhat similar to the Air Force's FX program. There was then a big effort to improve the FX program. In September 1968, a request was sent to major aerospace companies. The requirements entailed a single-seat fighter to have a maximum takeoff weight of 40,000 pounds, a maximum speed of Mach 2.5, and a thrust-to-weight ratio close to 1:1 at mission weight. It was also stated there needed to be a twin-engine arrangement. 4 companies submitted proposals. These included Fairchild Republic, General Dynamics, McDonnell Douglas, and North American Rockwell. The Air Force immediately eliminated General Dynamics and awarded contracts to the rest in December 1968. A year later, on the 23rd of December 1969, the McDonnell Douglas design won. The F-15A took flight on the 27th of July 1972. The two-seat B variant would first fly a year later in July 1973. They were powered by the new Pratt & Whitney F100 engines, which gave the F-15 the desired thrust-to-weight ratio of 1:1. The F-15's primary gun would be the M61 Vulcan. It could also carry 4 AIM-7 Sparrow missiles under the fuselage, just like the Phantom. It could also carry AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles and AIM-9 Sidewinders. Along with the fuselage mounts, the F-15 has 2 pylons under the wings. The F-15 came equipped with an advanced radar. The AN/APG-63 is able to look down, shoot down, and can distinguish low-flying targets from ground clutter. The F-15 also used new computer technology in order to reduce the pilot's workload. The F-15 would be introduced by the United States Air Force as the first dedicated air superiority fighter since the F-86 Sabre, which first flew in 1947. It is important to mention the design characteristics of the F-15, as it is what makes it a dominant air superiority fighter. The F-15 has an all-metal semi-monocoque construction, which is flat and wide and makes for a great lifting surface. The wings are a modified delta shape, which are swept back at 45 degrees. The F-15 has a low wing loading ratio, and combining this with the high thrust-to-weight ratio, it allows for tight turns without losing airspeed. The F-15 is able to accelerate in a vertical climb and is able to climb to 30,000 feet in 60 seconds. The largest operator of the F-15 is the United States Air Force. The first F-15 Eagle was delivered on November 13, 1974. Israel is also a large user of the F-15. The Israeli Air Force scored the F-15's first kill in 1979. Between 1979 and 1981, IAF F-15As reportedly downed 13 Syrian MiG-21s and 2 Syrian MiG-25s. As it turned out, the Soviet MiG-25 was not at all a super maneuverable fighter as the United States suspected upon its release. In 1982, during Operation Opera, IAF F-15s were credited with 41 victories. 23 of them were MiG-21s and 17 were MiG-23s. During the Gulf War, U.S. Air Force F-15s would score 31 victories against Iraqi aircraft, 5 of them being the MiG-29, 2 of them MiG-25s, and 2 Su-25s, and other various Soviet aircraft. Royal Saudi Air Force F-15s would also shoot down 2 Iraqi Mirage F-1s during Desert Storm. In total, as of 2008, the F-15 has a record of 104 kills to no losses. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell icon to be informed when I release new videos.